Something's wrong. Something has been wrong for a very long time. I feel it, and I know you can feel it too. Food lacks flavor and tires us. The water is laced with God knows what, and dehydrates us. Our technology siphons our energy, and when better technology is invented, it is immediately suppressed and disappears. Music and television manipulates minds to accept and cheer on things like the killing of our most innocent and defenseless, babies, and call it something more palatable. Abortion. The minds of our children are warped from a young age, groomed into modern slavery in the form of a 9-to-5 job, where nearly half of their earnings go to a government complacent and actively participating in crimes like the drug trade and human trafficking. Wars rage to fill pockets of those hiding in the shadows. People starve as their governing bodies live in lavish excess. False idols dance and sing as 2 and 4 demons openly. Evil seems to be trending, but enough is enough. All of this ends. First comes exposure, and then comes the erasure of everything that is wrong with the world.
When Marie Antoinette and King Louis were beheaded, they had a 2-year-old son, and the son was imprisoned. He was smuggled out and replaced with a retarded child. The young son, who would be Louis XVII, was taken out and he was put to be schooled. At 19 years old, King George summoned him to England, and with him was George Paysor. Now, George Paysor is a fake last name, which means paymaster. Yeah. George Paymaster and Paysor escaped during the French Revolution, and he controlled the money for the royal monarchy of France. He was kind of overseeing Prince Louis, now Daniel. He was called to the king, and the king gave him a new name, Daniel Paysor. And George Paysor, Paymaster's last name, was changed to Bayshore. And he gave him 600 acres of North Carolina, a ship with enough staff to help him when he got there, and a piece of Virginia Company. Before the 13 colonies and separation, that's what America was called, the Virginia Company, basically, sanctioned by the king. He went to the Bodie family in North Carolina and settled there. Now, they are all bloodline families. Paysor now, Daniel Paysor, if you look at the 12 bloodlines, the one that's hidden at the top is actually the French monarchy, now the Paysor family. And that bloodline is said to be the most powerful and important bloodline in the 12 bloodline families. These bloodlines believe that they are the descendants of the serpent and Eve of Cain, the Canaanite. To them, Daniel Paysor was the true bloodline of the Antichrist. The Rothschilds and Rockefellers will always be below the Paysor family, along with the Astors, the Beatties, Collins, Lee, Onassis, Kennedy. These are all the bloodlines. What he did first was he started building the railroads. When he built the railroads, he made it that they owned 100 miles north, south, east, and west of the railroad line. They made it that only railroad companies could own electric companies. The railroad that he built is the Charleston, Cincinnati, Chicago Railroad. So when he built the railroad, he also at the same time established the Western Union. What happened in 1871 was that America became a corporation, also owned by the Paysor family, but the 12 bloodlines, the 12 banks. Paysor owns all the railroads and the land surrounding it, all the electric companies. He's now running the steel companies that make the railways. He now has also Lancaster Mills, which is the biggest cotton mill in the world at this point. He also owns the AT&T, Western Union, and all of the forests around the railroads that make all the tracks and ties and cars and all of that. When he passes away, his son, Louis Cass Paysor, takes over everything. After the war, America was broke. The bankers decided that they would not lend America money unless America changed into a corporation, and therefore they would be assured that they would be paid back. Paysor decides with the 12 bloodline families, which you'll see will become the 12 banks that we still deal with to this day, they decide that the only way they're going to loan America money to rebuild is if they put a central bank in that is a private bank controlled by them through the District of Columbia. He brings down another Rothschild bloodline family, Leroy Springs. Springs owns Springmaid, and they're the Rothschild bloodline family in New York and New Jersey that were given Virginia Company land there. He comes down and takes over, and the son, Louis Cass Paysor, continues to build and build. Paysor now basically owns the entire United States grid, railroads, and now he's into banks because now he has the Fed. So the federal bank then starts swallowing up other banks. When he passes away, it's divided up, his fortune, into 3 different companies because he had 3 daughters. The Paysors are replaced by Leroy Springs, last name really Springsteen, goes in, takes all the paperwork from all the courthouses and says he's going to update it and changes all the names and takes out Paysor and puts in Springs. But there's still the 12 banks still being run by Paysor, but Paysor now had to remove his name because of the war. So now all the banks and everything are in the Rothschild family line and Rothschild Bank. Now, the Rothschild Bank of London at this point is financing everything. So what's going forward is the companies, they start leasing out the railroad. And leasing out these companies. By the end of leasing it out, they own 300 of the 500 corporations today that we know of as S&P 500. What it looks like is that there's the CEO and board of directors run these companies, but that's not true. To this day, all these companies are still in the Louis Cass Paysor Trust. After the Act of 1871 and the Fed, the American people start paying taxes. Well, our taxes are going to the Fed. Paysor, and part of his deal with England was that they would pay 20% of U.S. taxes to the crown for eternity.
There is no law, and to date, nobody has been able to show that there is a law for the average American citizen working day in and day out to pay an income tax.
The We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education put a full-page ad in the USA Today on July 7th, 2000. And within the body of that ad was a $50,000 challenge for anyone that could show the law. And to me, $50,000 is a lot of money. So I went after that and did the research based on the fact that I thought, let's put this baby to bed. I'm hearing all these rumors, I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'll answer these people's questions they're asking me, and then I'll win this $50,000. And, based on the research that I did throughout the year 2000 and that I'm still doing, I have not found that law. I've asked Congress, we've asked a lot of people in the IRS commissioners, helpers. They can't answer, because if they answer, the American people are going to know that this whole thing is a fraud.
There is no law. There is no law that requires the average American worker in the private sector to pay a direct, unapportioned tax on their labor and compensation for services. There is no law.
I really expected that, of course, there's a law that you can point to in the law book, the code, that requires you to file a tax return. Of course there is. I mean, I don't know what it is right then as he was speaking to me, but sure. So naively, I agreed to go off and research it and get back to him. 3.5 months later, I was at that point where I couldn't find the statute that clearly made a person liable, at least not me and most people I know, and I had no choice in my mind except to resign.
I had to leave the IRS because I presented evidence that I had accumulated indicating that the agency was violating the law and violating people's rights. And I asked the agency for a response to my sincere concerns. And the answer I got was that they would not respond to my concerns and that they would provide me with the paperwork necessary to tender my resignation.
You can look through the statutes and look for the law that requires you to pay. And when you do that, you can't identify a law that requires the average person in America who earns a wage and works in private business to pay an income tax.
American citizens, along with the foundation, have been asking the IRS to specifically provide them with the underlying legal foundation upon which they administer and enforce the personal income tax laws in our country.
At the national level, when people would attempt to contact somebody of a much higher authority, say the commissioner, same kind of thing. They would get answers that were in effect non-answers.
You have to understand that an agency which will unlawfully impose a tax that doesn't exist is not going to care if we, the people, don't know what our rights are. They're not going to tell us.
If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before 1 nickel is spent on the services taxpayers expect from government. People have been told, that you need this income tax system to fund government, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, my question is, well, if that's true, how did we fund government from 1776 to 1913?
The main purpose of the income tax is not to raise revenue, but to redistribute wealth and to control society.
A lot of people might say, well, gee, if there wasn't an income tax, what would happen to education? They don't understand that education is paid for the most part, out of state and local taxes, your property tax. People might say, well, how are we going to build and maintain our highways? If there's no money coming in to the government, we need our highways. There is a tax on every gallon of gasoline that people buy. Proceeds from the income tax do not pay for highway construction.
In Canada, taxation has escalated beyond mere inconvenience. It's a full-blown crisis. As of 2023, the average Canadian family spends nearly $47,000 or 43% of their income on taxes. That's more than the combined cost of housing, food, and clothing, which make up just 36% of their income. Since 1961, taxes have grown by an astonishing 2,705%, vastly outpacing inflation. What started as a temporary income tax in 1917 has metastasized into a monstrous system that taxes nearly every facet of life.
Breaking news, Canada is the highest tax country on the planet. Just take a look. Business tax, income tax, CPP tax, unemployment tax, GST, PST, HST, property tax, provincial income tax, tax on alcohol and tobacco, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, luxury tax, media tax, regulation tax, air travel tax, carbon tax. Like, what's the point of even living in this country?
Canada does not help people with ambition and drive in this country. I'll tell you why. The reason why I'm saying this is because over a few years ago, when I was working minimum wage, I would always get money back whenever I filed my tax return. I would always get somewhere between $800 to maybe $1,000. Fast forward today, I'm making way above of what the average Canadians are making. Now I'm paying at least 40 to 50% on whatever I'm making today. And on top of that, whenever I file my tax return, I'm getting letters from CRA stating I owe another $5,000. I have a friend of mine who owned a small business. He owed $50,000 in taxes. So whenever someone start a business in Canada and they start to grow, I see why they want to move to the States. I see the reason why. Because there's no such thing as safe haven for people like us who have the drive, who have the entrepreneurship mindset, people who has ambition, people who want to leave some kind of generation wealth. Like, people like that, they are not protected. And let's say you're someone with a goal. It's going to take a bigger toll on you, because what's going to happen is you get to that stage in life where you're making the money you want to make, and you're looking at your goal. You was like, I'm so close. You're like, I'm so close to the finish line. But guess what? Now you have to pay more money to the government. You have to pay your student loan. You have to pay your taxes. You got to pay everything. So you're looking at the finish line, but you can't reach it. So now you have to work another 10 or 15 or 20 years to get to that stage. It's hard.
Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is glyphosate. But it was a shocking number of people's bodies contain glyphosate in them, which is Roundup, which is an herbicide. disturbing weed killer ingredient tied to cancer found in 80% of U.S. urine samples.
History.
The guy in particular that I'm talking about he was wildly and just defending this, but he's completely connected to these companies, and people were pointing it out. Like, you have been paid by these companies. Like, you are in the pocket of these companies.
If the fake philanthropist, Bill Gates, doesn't get you with the toxic fake meat material or the poisonous cricket meal in your potato chips, he's going to try to cover some of the other bases by getting a coating on every fruit and vegetable you eat, organic or not. Clear, unable to remove it or wash it off. A coating that will send you to an early grave with heart attacks, strokes, and diabetes, but not before you suffer.
So one of the biggest mysteries in the organic produce world right now is, how did the new Appeal coating with financial backing from Bill Gates get approved for use on organic produce? You'll see these Appeal stickers on lots of produce items now. It means the produce has a coating on it that seals it up tight against anything getting in or out, preserves it longer, like the introduction of the refrigerator. Great, but what's in this coating? Well, it seems to be shrouded in mystery. The product intended to be organic, listed as Organappeal, is registered with the EPA as a pesticide with a rather short and cryptic ingredient list. Active ingredient, citric acid at 0.66%. Other ingredients, not named, 99.34%. And that's 100%. Great, it's all accounted for. Maybe it's listed that way because citric acid could qualify as organic if it's not from a synthetic source. But what about the other 99.34%? Because I'm supposed to eat this coating. Oh, and get this, the EPA requires this caution on the label. Wash thoroughly with soap and water after handling and before eating. The certificate the Organic Material Review Institute issued to it that approved its use on organics lists it as a fungicide with no ingredient specified. I'm not sure what that's based on, but this is starting to smell. It reeks of influence peddling. And the antiseptic for that smell is always sunlight with a liberal splash of transparency. I don't know about you, but I'm finding Appeal rather unappealing.
Each dye affects him differently.
Pay attention.
Red makes him hyper, gives him migraines, and causes brain buzzing. The behaviors resemble ADHD, and the effects last about 2 days. Green makes him manic, hyper, and euphoric. The behaviors resemble bipolar disorder in a manic phase, and the effects last less than a day. Blue makes him tired, moody, and grumpy. There's no disorder for that yet, but the effects last about a day. Yellow is sneakier. Yellow intensifies emotions, increases anxiety, increases agitation, aggravation, and defiance, leading to violent outbursts and thoughts of suicide. The behaviors resemble oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder, and the effects last 5 days.
Talk about Kellogg's, for example. Like, Kellogg's is a corporation that in 2015 decided to remove artificial food dyes from their cereals, made a commitment to do so by the end of 2018. Well, they haven't done it yet, and so they recognize that these artificial food dyes are problematic. And in the UK and in Europe, they actually require a warning label that says may cause adverse effects on activity and attention in children. So they affect the hyperactivity of children. So this affects children's health, these artificial food dyes.
Have y'all ever looked on the ingredients on any product and seen something called citric acid? Did y'all know the most commonly used form of citric acid that you can find in foods, drinks, beauty products, skincare is derived from black mold?
This is McDonald's French fries. In the US, there's 11 ingredients. In the UK, there's 3, and salt is optional. An ingredient called dimethylpolysiloxane is an ingredient preserved with formaldehyde, a neurotoxin, in the US version. This is used as a foaming agent so they don't have to replace the oil that often, making McDonald's more money here in the United States. But they don't do that across the pond. This is Skittles. Notice the long list of ingredient differences. 10 artificial dyes in the US version and titanium dioxide. This ingredient is banned in Europe because it can cause DNA damage. Artificial dyes are made from petroleum, and products containing these dyes require a warning label in Europe that states it may cause adverse effects on activity and attention in children. And they have been linked to cancer and disruptions in the immune system. This on the screen back here is Gatorade. In the US, they use red 40 and caramel color. In Germany, they don't. They use carrot and sweet potatoes to color their Gatorade. And let's look at cereal. General Mills is definitely playing some tricks on us. They launched a new version of Trix just recently in Australia. It has no dyes. They even advertise that, when the US version still does.
Eating genetically modified foods causes cancer because it actually puts into the body basic ingredients that the body does not know how to use. DNA from two different species are spliced together. A tomato and the DNA from an Atlantic salmon, they splice together to create a tomato that will grow in the snow, but it actually doesn't happen. When a human being eats genetically modified food and that food's broken down to these simple structures, especially amino acids, the body says, "Who are you? I don't recognize you." And if there's no other amino acids, they have to use them for the building of the DNA, and that causes flaws.
We're not cannibals, so what we do is we take those because we can make some shekels, and we give them to the slaughterhouses, and those are pounds and pounds and pounds of meat that we grind up in the sausage and the hamburger. And that's why we made those the most popular things, sausage for breakfast and hamburger for lunch. And so all the goyim out here are really eating their children. And even when we say this outright and tell you people, you don't believe it. So that's your problem.
They found genetic DNA evidence of children's teeth in the food, in the burgers, which linked it back to, not Wisconsin, Missouri or Wyoming, one of those states that's in the middle of nowhere, where they actually found human meat inside one of the processing plants at McDonald's.
Investigation and information on that. The FBI has been following for 3 days. Here on 7 Action News, is a Detroit business buying and selling human body parts illegally? And what was inside the business? It may shock you.
This is the owner of the business just returning to take back possession of his business. More on that in a second. But take a look. Another busy day out here on Detroit's east side, just down the road from City Airport. Sources say they have removed several boxes of what is believed to be human remains. Sources say many people. This was a big operation. And get this, inside this business, a saw used to cut up bodies, it is believed. All taken away as evidence to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office, where it will be tested. This business is known as International Biological. It advertised as a medical educational service provider. The owner is Art Rathburn. He has a mortician license, has had in Michigan since 1982. But the big question is, did he get human bodies illegally? And was he selling them illegally?
Did y'all hear about the McDonald's in Germany that was serving people human meat for 7 months and nobody found out until one of the employees found a wedding ring engraved in one of the meats? Yes. So at this McDonald's, the manager wanted to cut costs so they could make more profit. They started to purchase their meat wholesale from a local meat supplier. The meat supplier was way more affordable and it just made sense for the company. One day when one of the employees was a 19-year-old employee named Emma, she was literally preparing burgers. She found something hard inside one of the burgers. She pulled it out and it was a wedding ring engraved "Forever Yours, Anna 2018." She told the manager and the manager called the police immediately. The police did an investigation and turns out the meat was human meat. The local meat supplier that McDonald's had switched over to, that local meat supplier was literally in business with a corrupt funeral home owner, and that funeral home owner was literally selling him those bodies. And the local meat supplier was also taking the bodies from the funeral home, and he was just taking homeless people off the street that had nobody checking for them. He would mix 70% real beef with 30% human meat. That's why his prices were so cheap.
We all have been sold the biggest con of our entire life. And this is that the problem is left versus right, or Republicans versus Democrats. And that is the distraction fireworks show that they want us screaming about while they're doing something else. And this is a magician's trick, and I'm about to really show you what Charlie has kind of exposed here. If you turned on cable news today, you go in your living room, turn it on, maybe you scroll social media, what are you going to see? The absolute fringe. They're going to show you the loudest, dumbest, most cartoonish people from the other side blasted in your face 24/7. You're not being shown your neighbor or your coworker or the mom next door who votes differently. You're being shown a bunch of professional lunatics that are handpicked to make you think one thing. And the one big thing that they want you to think is, oh my God, these people are insane. They are the enemy. That's the reason that we're going downhill. And none of this is an accident. This is word for word textbook psychological operations. And military psyops manuals literally describe how you isolate a target audience, then you pump them full of a bunch of outrage, you create a tribal us versus them identity. This is straight out of a psyops textbook. So why would we want to do this? Or why would psyops want to do this? Because once you're locked into tribal thinking, you're going to swallow anything. You're going to believe any lie about the other side. You're going to cheer when other people suffer. You'll excuse things that you would never excuse in your own neighborhood if you watched it right in front of you and it was one of your neighbors. This is exactly the playbook on how you get otherwise decent, kind people laughing at a murder on the internet. That is how you radicalize a country without firing a shot.
Learn the politics, and then they would give guns to one of these Indian kingdoms, and then they would give guns to the other one, and then they would stir up animosity between them, maybe racial, maybe ancient hatred that they had for, and stir them up until they would fight each other and bloody each other and weaken each other, and then the British could come in and conquer both of the weakened kingdoms. And they did this again and again and again till they took over all of India, a quarter of the world's population. Then look at the British tried to do it in America during the Revolutionary War. The British went to the Indians and promised them money for scalps. And you scalp the Americans, right? We'll pay you. And it got so bad that it's listed as one of the 27 reasons in the Declaration of why we were rebelling against the king. It says the king has incited insurrection among us. And so this idea is you want to conquer a country, you got to go in and find the divisions between them. And so when the Belgians colonized the Congo in Africa, measured their heights and their features, and they would classify them, you're a Hutu and you're a Tutsi. Well, prior to that, the people all just got along with each other. Some were tall, some were short, hey, we're all just family. But now then they made them go down to the government offices and register as Hutus and Tutsis and begin to identify with those two groups. And then they began to pit them against each other, and they began to massacre and genocide each other. And then in the confusion, the colonizing power could take control of the whole country.
You ever hear about in this country is our differences. That's all the media and the politicians are ever talking about, the things that separate us, things that make us different from one another. That's the way the ruling class operates in any society. They try to divide the rest of the people. They keep the lower and the middle classes fighting with each other so that they, the rich, can run off with all the fucking money. Fairly simple thing, happens to work. You know, anything different, that's what they're going to talk about. Race, religion, ethnic and national background, jobs, income, education, social status, sexuality, anything you can do, keep us fighting with each other so that they can keep going to the bank.
2 years ago, I found out that our prescription drugs are the third leading cause of death after heart disease and cancer. Our drugs kill around 200,000 people in America every year, and half of these people die while they do what their doctors told them. So they die because of the side effects. The other half die because of errors. And it's often the doctors that make the errors, because any drug may come with 20, 30 or 40 warnings, contraindications, precautions, and so on. No doctor in the world knows about all this. So they give patients drugs that they should not have given them, that interact dangerously with other drugs or food items or so on. And then the patients die. That's the other half.
Hey, I'm Trey the pharmacist. Conventional medicine, I can read through these, but it can cause a lot of problems, right? It's the 5th leading cause of death in the United States is prescription medications that are taken appropriately. Right dose, right manner of taking it. The side effects can be death in some cases. These are medications. As I learned in pharmacy school, every single drug is a poison and some of them have beneficial side effects.
Ralph Baric, the inventor and the weaponizer of coronavirus, also had the hand in developing remdesivir, the drug that was allegedly used to treat patients with COVID, except for the fact that by 2018, that drug had a kill ratio of 53%. Documented, published.
Like one of the 5 top leading causes of death in Canada are pharmaceutical drugs taken as directly, not abused. So, and then you get sicker and sicker, and now you're having side effects to manage. We'll give you drugs for the side effects of another drug. Yes. And it's criminal.
If you use mouthwash, so 2 out of 3 Americans use mouthwash, and there's 2 out of 3 Americans that have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. So we took normal, healthy individuals, we gave them mouthwash for 7 days, and then stopped the mouthwash. 4 days later, we brought them back. 7 days after starting mouthwashes, in some cases, we saw a 26 millimeter increase in blood pressure.
Whoa.
So the only thing we did was kill the microbiome.
And mouthwash
and their
is
blood
available
pressure.
to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, 200-something million Americans that wake up every morning and use it. Mouthwash completely kills the oral microbiome, shuts down nitric oxide production. That leads to an increase in blood pressure, erectile dysfunction, and early onset of Alzheimer's.
How many patients have you been able to cure so far?
I would say 1.
How many people have I cured? Well, there are no real cures right now in psychiatry.
I don't know that any of us are ever completely cured of anything.
What kind of biological tests do we have available today for detecting mental illnesses?
None. I always felt like I was throwing darts in the dark at my patients and had hurt some of them. There is a reason that most psychiatric medications have black box warnings. Give them to the wrong person and you can precipitate a disaster.
We don't know if I give you a medication if it is going to work or not.
To a certain degree, it's trial and error.
I have cured none of my patients.
Who benefits? The people who make the diagnosis.
$2.71 trillion. 2.4 to 2.7 is the estimate of 2024.
How much money we're spending on military?
On military equipment, on things that were going to explode into smoke. Extreme poverty everywhere in the world could end for 10 to 12% of that budget. So if we replace our military spending, 10% of that, to go to people who are in extreme poverty, nobody will be poor in the world. Okay, you can end world hunger for less than 4%. Nobody would be hungry in the world. You know, if you take again 10 to 12% universal healthcare, every human being on the planet would have free healthcare for 10 to 12% on what we're spending on war.
So the money's supposed to, all the money in the airplane is supposed to go to the Afghan International Bank and go to humanitarian aid. Well, a big chunk of the money comes off the airplane and goes other places, and it has 8 stops. So you ready for them? First stop, so this is the delivery weekly of US dollars. It goes to the Prime Minister of the Taliban. So his name is Mullah Mohammed Hassan Akhund, okay? The second delivery goes to my favorite person, the Deputy Prime Minister, Mullah Burader. The third delivery goes to the GDI, who I told you is Taliban CIA. It's run by Abdul Haq Wasik, if you remember. He was one of the ones released for Bergdahl. So far, by the way, Mohammed, number 1, Burader, and Wasik. These are all sanctioned designated terrorists. So all 3 of these deliveries are against US and international law, by the way, okay? The next delivery goes to the Ministry of Interior, which I told you already is led by Sirajuddin Haqqani, and that's where all the passports are being made for terrorists. The 5th one, Siraj is double dipping. Then they do delivery to his house. So delivery number 5 goes to the home of Sirajuddin Haqqani, which should blow people's mind. This man sent 1,050 suicide bombers at US and NATO troops. Over 1,000 suicide bombers were sent by him alone, and the US is dropping cash off at his house weekly. Like, it's mind-blowing. Then I'm almost like losing track where we are. The next delivery goes to Hibatullah Akhundzada, who's the head of the Taliban. The next delivery goes to Saif al-Adil, who is basically the head of Al-Qaeda's military commission. And then the last delivery goes to 3 people, but I think we wait, because if I do that one, we're gonna have to talk about the first 7 deliveries, if that's okay.
Okay.
So,
for Secretary of State, Senator Marco Rubio, who has received $1 million from the Israel lobby.
Senator Rubio, will you call for ceasefire?
No, I will not.
Gaza?
On the contrary.
Senator Rubio,
are you filming it?
Wait,
So I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way. Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. So Hamas has stopped building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000 have died? You don't care about the babies that are being killed every day?
I think it's horrifying. I think it's terrible, and I think Hamas is 100% to blame. That's what I think. Make sure you post that, please.
For the EPA, Lee Zeldin, who has received $916,000 from the Israel lobby.
You should not be coddling the largest state sponsor of terrorism, who calls the United States the great Satan. They call Israel the little Satan. They chant death to America. They develop intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, intercontinental. That's not meant for Israel, that's meant for us.
For National Security Advisor, Representative Mike Waltz, who has received $235,000 from the Israel lobby.
I think at this point, the only thing that is going to stop the Supreme Leader from his nuclear obsession is a very credible use and threat of military force.
So, your finance minister has pledged $500 billion of taxpayers' dollars to rebuild Ukraine. Wow. Imagine if we use $500 billion of taxpayers' money to rebuild Canada.
Canada just pledged another $4.3 billion to Ukraine. You know what? Fuck that. People here cannot even afford groceries. Food banks are overrun, shelters are packed, and our Canadians are freezing in tents, but our government sitting here playing sugar daddy to the world. While Zelensky is in New York having a shopping spree, our Canadians are trying to figure out how to fill up their gas tank and the fridge at the same week. Let me make this very clear. The system does not give a fuck about you. Not the government, not your employer, not your job.
The Pentagon just lost track of $62 billion. It was aid sent to Ukraine from the United States, and they're saying it's an accounting error. That's not a typo. $62 billion is gone. To compare, NASA's budget is about $27 billion, so we're taking over 2 of NASA's right now. While the government is saying the money was overestimated and it's not really lost, but no one can explain where it went to. Meanwhile, Americans are being told that we can't afford basic infrastructure, healthcare, or education. So I want to know, where's the accountability? $62 billion, and we just move on. Make it make sense.
Let me give you another, it just strikes me, let me give you a quick example about the maritime law, the law of water, the law of the sea. Money is water by law. So when a ship, this is why all ships are female by law. All ships, rocket ship, sailing ship, air ship, it doesn't matter. If it's a ship, it's female.
Right.
Because the captain always refers to his ship as she. Right. She's a good ship, or she's done this. Why she? Because she delivers the product.
Right, the
Without
vessel.
she, there is no product, right?
It's a vessel. It's a
Of course it is a vessel. So is your body. It's a vessel that produces a product.
Right.
So when the ship pulls into harbor, it stops, and where it parks is called its berth. It's berthing the ship, or she sits in her berth. And every item on that ship, coming out that ship, is money. It's money changing hands.
Right.
And it came in on water. So it's called. So every piece has to have what is called a certificate of manifest, because she is sitting in her berth. That's why when you were born, your mother's water broke. You were inside a container of water. Her water broke, and you came out, and therefore you have to have a birth certificate.
Wow.
there, and it's got to be signed by the dock, because that's where the ship is sitting, because the dock is where the ship sits. So once you begin to see how the words and terms are all based on maritime admiralty, the law of water, the cash flow, the liquid asset.
But it's not just in English, the dock, the water.
Yeah, of course. But of course, it goes all the way back to the English or British domination of the seas.
1666, while London was on fire and everyone was distracted because they were obviously going through the Black Plague, Parliament passed a law, behind closed doors of course, called the decay. What did it do? So basically, the decay, it said everyone is presumed legally dead or lost at sea unless proven otherwise. So back then, the legal system was based on maritime law, the law of the sea. So by declaring everyone lost at sea, the state could take ownership of your body, your property, and your legal identity, all held in a trust, until you came back and proved you're alive. So to manage all your stuff while you were dead, the system created a legal copy of you. This is called your strawman, which we're now familiar with if you've watched my previous videos, of course. That's the name that we see in all capital letters on legal documents. That's the version of you that isn't real. It's a legal fiction, a fake, a corporate identity that the system interacts with. So when you go to court or deal with the banks or get a driver's license or even pay your taxes, you're doing it all through the straw man, not the living you. And according to the system, 3 private trusts are created for every person. So there's real property trust, which controls your land and stuff. Personal trust, which controls your body and legal identity. And your ecclesiastical trust, which controls your soul and your spiritual rights. These are based on the presumption, meaning the system assumes that you're lost at sea or you don't know this exists and you won't do anything about it. So your trust and your value is managed and profited from and by the governments and banks. So how do you change this? I know that's what you guys want to know. How do we change this? So the system runs on consent and assumptions. If you stay silent, the system assumes you're okay with the straw man representing you. But if you learn how to reclaim your status as a living man or woman, you can declare yourself alive. Imagine you have to declare yourself alive. The trickeries. Oh Lord. So separate yourself from the straw man, collapse the trust in your name, and step out of maritime law and into common law or natural law. Did we have any clue that existed? Did we know that we were in someone's game? We're literally in somebody's game, guys. We had no idea.
These questions start with the so-called 5 dancing Israelis who were seen celebrating and filming a jetliner slam into the Twin Towers from a top bay removal span in New Jersey on September 11th, as reported at the time by mainstream media outlets.
It began when this woman was watching the Twin Towers burning from her apartment in New Jersey. She noticed 3 men on top of a van, posing for pictures with the towers burning in the background.
And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me. You know, they didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
The witness called police, who stopped the van hours later and arrested 5 men. All 5, it turns out, were Israeli. They were turned over to the FBI. Sources tell ABC News during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence.
Well, big catastrophe, and I'm Israeli, and I hope that now people understand what we have to deal with, the kind of people that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Forget Lyndon Johnson, forget the CIA, forget Fidel Castro. The Mossad killed Kennedy because they were so upset over what he did to Ben-Gurion. There's a very surprising series of letters between Kennedy and David Ben-Gurion, not only the prime minister, but the founder of Israel. They're very angry letters in which Kennedy is saying to Ben-Gurion, I'm killing myself trying to get a nuclear test ban treaty. I've even got de Gaulle on board, and that's impossible. and you keep testing in Dimona. You've got to stop. Ben-Gurion says, it's easy for you to say sitting in Hyannisport. I'm sitting with the Arabs all around me, and you want me to give up my nuclear testing. And Kennedy threatens him, and he threatens him in such a way that Ben-Gurion resigned. And I will tell you that I found articles, not in any crackpot publications, but in very sophisticated publications.
As Israel's genocide in Gaza went full scale with entire families wiped out, Arab and Western governments chose this moment to recognize Palestine. But what they recognized wasn't freedom. It was a funeral. While Gaza was turned into rubble, these same governments embraced a hollow gesture, recognizing a hypothetical Palestinian state that exists only on paper. A symbolic act, as 2.2 million real Palestinians face starvation, siege, and extermination. They call it reviving the two-state solution. But it's just the same old theater, staged peace talks while the land theft continues. Urgent steps toward a virtual state, but no steps to stop the bombs, no steps to feed the hungry, no steps to protect the people. Last year, Ireland, Norway, and Spain proudly recognized Palestine. This year, Saudi Arabia and France co-chaired a peace conference at the UN. They called it the New York Declaration. 142 countries voted for it. But beyond the speeches, no protection, no justice, no change. These are not peace efforts, they're permission slips. Permission for the world to look away while genocide unfolds. A performance dressed as diplomacy. Recognition without protection is complicity. They don't want peace, they want silence.
Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat.
Arafat himself told an Italian newspaper, quote, Hamas is a creature of Israel. He even claimed that former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin admitted as much to him, calling it a fatal error. Now, you might be wondering, why should I believe mad Ron Paul or the famously shady Yasser Arafat? Well, you don't have to. You can believe top Israeli and US officials who've basically owned up to all this. Brigadier Yitzhak Segev, for example, who was the Israeli military governor in Gaza and later told a New York Times reporter that he helped finance the Islamic movement. The Israeli government gave me a budget, he said, and the military government gives to the mosques. Colonel David Hakam, who worked in Gaza in the late 1980s as an Arab affairs expert in the Israeli military, has admitted that the original sin was Israeli support for Yassin in the late 70s. But at the time, he has argued, nobody thought about the possible results. Well, Avner Cohen did. Cohen was the Israeli official who was responsible for religious affairs in Gaza for more than 2 decades, and who now says, quote, Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation. Yeah, Cohen's words. He actually wrote an official report to his superiors in the mid-1980s, warning them not to play divide and rule in the occupied territories and calling on Israel to, quote, break up this monster before this reality jumps in our face.
So are you saying Benjamin Netanyahu deliberately boosted Hamas to try to prevent a Palestinian state?
Yeah, sure. He deliberately and systematically even told on record, whoever wants to avoid the threat of a two-state solution has to support my policy of paying protection money to the Hamas.
So what we did, with the permission of our Prime Minister, is to let Qatar to transfer a huge amount of money in cash, probably more than $1.4 billion. By doing it, we increased the power of Hamas. We did everything in order to make sure that Hamas will go on controlling Gaza and Palestinian Authority will control the West Bank, so they will fight each other.
The jinn races, many of them look like lizards, literally. And as a result, if their frequency enters into people and occupies that person, they create that barrier all around, and that's their way of masking themselves, where they create a frequency and they look human. Under certain sounds and under their excitement and stress, that veil is distorted at times and people all of a sudden see something they shouldn't be seeing, because that creature is trying to keep a veil of who they are. So it's a manipulation of energy that Allah is giving in Surah Al-Yasin. that we create a barrier in front of them and behind them. There's not a physical barrier because everybody recites it. But they don't think from the world of malakut and the world of light. That what are these barriers? That one, if you believe, Allah give you permission, recite. And with belief, this barrier comes up, they don't see you. The barrier behind comes up, they don't see you, you are now masked. Like a transparent system.
The Reptilian Empire, which is very large and it consists of approximately 21 star systems in this part of the galaxy that they have taken over. And when they take over a planet, they usually turn the inhabitants into slaves. Not direct slaves, but indirect slaves, because they want them to continue to be productive. And we were just going to be part of that empire.
Would you say that we are currently under the control of reptilians?
I think so. They control the media, they control the banks, they control the educational system, they control religion. What's left?
So what is the actual process towards awakening that humans can achieve? How do we kick our rulers aside and activate our own potential?
The main advantage that we have is our consciousness. According to an alien by the name of Kyla, who came here from the Procyon system, well, we have the ability to reach into the higher dimensions. The reptilians do not have that ability. That's why they try and keep us dumbed down. If we could raise our consciousness, not very much really, to the point where we see what they're all about and understand what it's all about, the game is over. They can't win here.
Cynthia Erivo was playing Jesus at the Hollywood Bowl when viewers noticed something strange. Look at her hands. Do they look human to you? And before you say it's just a camera trick or bad angle, this isn't the first time she's been seen like this. So what's really going on there?
I'm not going nowhere. However time it takes, I'm going to, make things right. And together, me and Daddy's the Holy Spirit. Because things are happening more and more fast, they're having to do it in the open, and that's what we want. Because remember, the rules of engagement, the current rules of engagement for me and my squad, they have to be exposed in order for us to take them out.